Here we go.
So you should all get a prompt now to say it's recording. And we can crack on. Right, so great. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much to the panel for joining us. I am just going to do a quick introduction to what we're doing today, and I'm just going to hand over to the panel for a quick introduction of each of them. So if you're new to Lead 50/50, then Lead 50/50 is an organisation really set up with a social purpose to encourage and promote women into leadership roles, but have always had the view that they want to do that alongside men and get men into the conversation. So around I think 3 or 4 months ago, the team at Lead 50/50 were reaching out to men and asking what men thought about getting involved and how to get involved. And so I responded, and I came up with an idea with them, and then what came out of it was the Men for Equality series, which is really a series of events that we're really hoping to lead a conversation led by men alongside women, men getting involved in the conversation that maybe haven't involved in the conversation before, and dealing with some of the topics that that men can be involved in the gender debate. So that's where we've got to, and this is the first event, so thanks for joining us. So I'm going to hand on to the panel just to do an intro. I'll do mine first, basically. So hi, I'm Jago Brown. I'm the commercial director of UKLC, which is a junior language course operator operating all around the UK. I've also recently been appointed to the board of English UK, and so I'm very, very happy and proud to be part of that organisation. So I've got 3 kids. They are 10, 6 and 4. I live in Scotland. I'm originally from London, and I have a bit of a background in flexible working. So I pretty much from the last, so I took 3 or 4 months off between jobs when my first child was born, and I was working flexibly from then on, full time, but a lot of working from home and fitting a lot of childcare and home responsibilities around my job. And then in 2019, took a break from that career to stay at home with my family. I wanted to get my youngest child through to nursery, and then I was going to go back to work, and then COVID came, and so I've extended that a little bit. And then earlier this year, my wife was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. So at the moment, I'm off work fully, and I am with her as much as I can be, and then with the kids, and then as well, we're working through that together. So that's really where I'm coming from. And so if I hand over first of all to Shoko, would you like to just say a few words about yourself?
Yes, hi everybody, my name is Shoko Doherty. I'm the CEO of Celtic English Academy in Cardiff, so it's an independently owned language school. I recently elected as a vice chair of English UK's board, so I will be working closely with Jago, which I'm really looking forward to. English UK is the National Trading Association of Accredited English Language School. I'm also a mum of 3 children, 2, 9 and 11 years old. I had 3 short maternity leaves, and every time I had a babies, and then I went back to work almost straight away. My husband and I swapped the role 6 years ago as well. He used to be the managing director of Celtic English Academy. So he's now the primary care of our children while I work full-time. So he's mainly staying at home dad. So it's a little bit similar to Jago as well.
Thanks, Shoko. David?
Okay, thanks, Jago. So I'm David Duff. I'm a commercial director for Azamara, which is a cruise company, which until a couple of months ago was part of the Royal Caribbean family, which might be a brand you're more familiar with. I've been with them for, I'm trying to remember now, 13, 14 years. And whilst I was with them, I was one of the early beneficiaries of the new parental leave scheme that gave the opportunity for fathers to share parental leave with their mothers. I remember at the time making jokes, I think it was Nick Clegg that introduced it, that I would take some time on the golf course with a golf buggy with our newborn, and enjoying a nice summer. Ever called my bluff on it and suggested perhaps we should actually consider it and discuss the option of me taking some time off. And when I thought about it, I thought I couldn't really think of any logical reason as to why not. I mean, it's obviously at the time not something that necessarily first comes to mind as a father, but it made total sense. My wife did make a point of making sure she used up the summer first, though, before I took the leave. But I did take a couple of months of parental leave tagged onto her time. A lot of thoughts went through it at the time, and I'm sure we'll get into it in the discussion of some of the pressures around that, some of the worries you have about it, but also some of the positive opportunities you have to spend the time with a kid. And I think it was what's really different is whilst you have the weekend time, you do a lot of that work as a duo. And I think it's really nice to have some dedicated time one-on-one with your child to learn the rhythms of a day, all the pressures that go with kind of looking after someone who's still under 1 year old. But also start to see those milestones as they come along in terms of their development as well. So it helps with the bonding side. I think it really helped us in terms of, or myself in understanding all the work that's involved in being a father, being a parent. And I think going forward from that, it really helps when issues come up around childcare, because my wife obviously has her own career as well, and we both continue to work in our careers, is that how we're juggling that, and everything is kind of approached as an equal, as two equal parents, and not a lopsided conversation where one is more kind of seen as the caregiver and the other one's there to kind of help out a bit more. So that's something we've definitely taken away from that. I have a second child, and again, same time, I took some time at the end of my wife's maternity leave as well. I took a slightly shorter time because she wanted a bit more time this time around with our son. But again, it was just great to have that kind of month or so that I took dedicated time again, as I said, and just build that early relationship with our son. At the same time as obviously our oldest daughter as well, she's going through school, to be around and more involved in that as well with her. So as I say, probably more we'll get into as we discuss, and I'll stop rambling because I did warn Jago I might ramble.
It's not cool, Dave. Thanks for that. Jane?
I have to remember to unmute myself every single time.
Yeah.
I'm Jane, I'm the Chief Executive of Working Families, and we're a charity that exists to support the UK's 13 million working parents. I've been in the job since about September 2018. I don't have children, but I do have a brood of wonderful godchildren, and I am often dragged in, well, I was when they were little, dragged in to do collections from school, and it has been one of the joys of my life to watch those children grow up. Although there was a couple of years in the middle when they were teenagers that I kind of stayed away. And I am on my second marriage, and I say that only to say that the second marriage is a keeper. My husband and I have been together for 20 years now, and he and I share things equally. And the difference that has made in our joint lives is extraordinary. So I would recommend 50-50 in all kinds of ways to everybody. That's me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. And Robin?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Robin Fry, and I'm the Group HR Director at Oxford International, which some of you may know is a reasonably large private education provider. I've been with the organisation, it feels like man and boy. I'm also governor at Emmanuel School in Wandsworth, and also on the advisory board of Doverbrooks, another independent school in Oxford. About 16 years ago, slightly unfortunately, I was recovering from pretty serious illness, but fortunately, it also gave me the opportunity to spend a lot of time with our young son. So where I became the primary caregiver, and I look back on that time with an awful lot of fondness. And therefore sort of recognizing, you know, the value of dads being able to spend a significant amount of time with their children. So anything that we can do to facilitate that happening, make it more, to normalize it, I will be an ardent supporter of. And I think I'll leave it there. Although just to say, like David, my wife, she has her own career as a secondary school English teacher. Obviously takes up quite a large part of her time. So again, you know, we very much have shared parental duties, and I think again that is of great benefit to our son Ben as well as to Alison and myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. That's great. So I just want to unpack the question just a little bit before we move on to a few more questions, and just inviting everybody that is on the call again. Thanks for joining us. Any questions then that you want to put to us, then please just pop it into the chat. I think Ella is on hand to sort of pick those up and pass them on. So again, we want to focus on the men's side a little bit today, because this is really about you know, encouraging more men to talk about this, encouraging men into the conversation. So the question really, I think, is about equality and leadership needing all people to have the opportunity and the intention and the ability and the encouragement, you know, to work flexibly. And therefore, because I think there's so I was on the train the other day and I heard two guys talking in front of me, and I would say mid-70s, and one of them said, I wrote it down word for word, I haven't got it written down, but he said something along the lines of, well, of course, women aren't just housewives now, some of them have jobs too, you know. And I think that's, you know, for me, I had this conundrum in my head for years. I've talked about this a bit recently, that you have a concept of a working mum because mums do everything in the home and also work. Whereas if you're dad, you're not a working dad because obviously you don't do anything in the home. So, I mean, the stats are showing that is, you know, the case in lots of places, but it isn't the case all the time. So I think it's important that we have that conversation, that men are, you know, able to have that conversation and talk about it. But research does say that women don't go for roles of leadership and responsibility as much as men because they have burdens at home. You know, there's the concept of the second shift. So you do your work, a man does his work, and then you come home and the women then pick everything else up. You know, that's a reality for some people. But I think more and more that's not the case. But then I look at there's no gender pay gap in the UK for full-time workers under 40. But then the parental penalty kicks in. And so by the time we retire, women have, you know, I think between a third and a half of women are now working part-time when men aren't. So by the time we retire, I think men have got, you know, 5 times the retirement pot that women have. So this is an important discussion. It's about what men can do and about how women feel about it. So if I can move to, so one more quote. Diane Elsom has said, so she's I think a politician from Australia and New Zealand. She said, we've talked a lot in the last 30 years about getting women into paid work. Now we need to talk about getting men into unpaid work. So this is a sort of summary of what we're trying to get to. So Dave, can I come to you again? Were there any difficulties when you took the shared parental leave? Anything you or your wife faced?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is, because I was very early on, I think as you said, it was Nick Clay at the time. So I think I came in just as the law was changing and that I was able to do it. And credit to my employers at the time, Royal Caribbean, they were really positive about this when I raised it with them. And the HR department in particular, they're really, really pleased that I tabled this, that I was going to go through with it. And you know, it really coincides with a lot of how they are as an organization. So that really helped on one side. I think it also helps me a little bit because travel in itself, often as and I know Jago's come from the same industry, there's a strong percentage of ladies who work in travel, including going all the way up to leadership positions as well. So it may be a little bit more unusual from that context, maybe compared to some other industries. And again, I think that maybe helped a little bit in terms of any unease I had about it in terms of how it might be interpreted, because clearly no one had ever done this before. That said, there's plenty of being honest, plenty of guys there in senior leadership positions, and it is in the back of your mind how they might interpret this, as well as the practical considerations, which I'm sure goes through the mind of every lady when she goes for her own maternity leave, is what's the impact on my career? Will it go on hold? Even just the idea of doing a couple of months, kind of all of a sudden when it started looming, starts to feel kind of, oh, this is a little bit unusual and different. So there was all those experiences I had, although I have to say when I went through it all, everybody was great about it. I never heard anything negative, or anything that people looked at it in a bad way. Time passes quickly. It really does. Even that short time I had went quickly. I know as an employer and a manager of people who go on maternity leave, it goes quickly for them too as well. Before you know it, they're back and they can pick up careers. So it is something in your own internal mind that you sometimes worry about. I'm going to be away, I'm going to miss out a lot. And actually probably you're going to miss out less than you really think. And you're trading off for something that's really positive for you in your own personal life, which again will also feed back into how you perform at work. But I think what comes from that though is having a good positive work environment that is open to this way of working. The fact that they made that easier for me, they were more accommodating because the law hadn't quite come in yet, and so they were flexible around paperwork and making sure that they would support it rather than holding me down to, well, you've missed this milestone so you can't do it. And I think that's something that all companies should think about, because it's generally even from what I talked to other friends, it's not something that's actively promoted, I think, in companies as much as maybe other benefits and other things in other areas, turns around to quality or even benefits for encouraging ladies in work, etc. So I think that's probably one takeaway I'd think about, that probably we need to work on to encourage more men to do it. I keep saying ladies rather than women. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying it, but anyway.
No, thanks, Dave. That's interesting. So I'm actually going to coming on, I hope, later to a bit about how you actively promote it, because I think that's a common theme that it isn't enough. So Shoko, you've talked about swapping with your husband. Is there anything you'd add to that, to what Dave's saying? Any any difficulties with that? Anything that you worked through, to your benefit between you?
I think at the beginning we both had a lot of mini fights between each other, because it was a huge change, personal life change and also professional career. We both worked together in the same language schools as well. So in terms of how, at home, who cook, when, what. I used to cook almost 6-7 days a week. When we swapped the role, we decided my husband cook 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and I cook weekend. But then he was perhaps not as good cook as now, so he had to learn quite a lot. And at the beginning, we used to have bolognese quite regularly, and then we just wanted to have something more varieties, and then we start getting takeaways more often, and there's a lot of things like that. Just who is going to do washings, but even after we settled within our household, when he goes to shopping with perhaps newborn baby, then if the baby started crying and he was on his own, some ladies in a supermarket come to him, say, oh, where's baby's mum? And James felt that, well, I'm perfectly fine, I'm a dad. But then it's just a perception, isn't it? Women are supposed to look after newborn babies, and he really found hard to deal with that situation. A lot of stigmas, or even just in family as well. For him to make the decisions to swap the role with me was big decisions, and some of our family member commented, say, why are you doing this? Men should be the one breadwinner, and do a lot of challenge trying to justify and trying to explain why we're doing it. And in the end, we are now really happy that we made that decision. My husband and children are very, very close, and my kids have no sort of perceptions that household work is just mum's work. They know that it's equal, and they have seen that as they grow up. So I think there are so many positive things, but at the beginning, especially the first one or 2 years, we found really hard.
Brilliant, thanks. That's interesting. So, Robin, is there anything that Oxford International do particularly to encourage men or women to take, well, particularly men, but to take flexible working or to take parental paternity, all the different leaves?
Yeah, I think when I have to confess, for men, no. For women, when they go on maternity, as part of the before they go on maternity leave, we always make them aware that flexible working will be an option. When they're coming back to work, or they can certainly make that request. But with regard to men, no, we don't, and I think it's an interesting point, because I think what we want to do is really start to normalize the conversation around men making these requests, and I think to do that it's going to need a lot of promotion, just so that, I mean, even I would feel uncomfortable making the request, but that's not because of my boss or the company that I work for. I think it's a societal thing.
You still feel that, right?
So I think it's again normalizing, what is actually can feel like a challenging conversation. So I think society's got a lot to do. Other organisations have got a lot to do, and so have Oxford International.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for that. So Jane, is this so in your professional opinion from the charity side, are these the type of conversations that are happening a lot? Is this typical? I think you've muted.
Yes, every time. So it's absolutely typical. We recently ran a poll with YouGov, and one of the most interesting things that came out of that poll was that 40% of working parents said that they household responsibilities, and we're talking the emotional load, the cooking, the cleaning, looking after the children, as a result of lockdown had become 50-50. 35% of those same families said it would continue post-lockdown. And on our helpline, we are getting an increasing number of men calling us who want help with applying for and being granted shared parental leave. Mm-hmm. And that's a big change, which we're noticing. It's absolutely fascinating. There are some wonderfully good news stories. A lot of them come from the much larger organizations. So, for example, Aviva do 6 months paid parental leave, and that is for men and women. I did a talk a few years ago literally 2 years ago, for a professional services company. And I was talking to a group of young men, late 30s, early 40s. They had all taken the full 6 months of paid parental leave that they had at their firm, and they were encouraged to by their bosses. And I'm talking an enormous professional services firm. And the thought was these chaps were all probably middle management. And the thought was, well, it's an option that the professional services company gives, so everybody should take it. Where they found the really challenging issue was that having taken that paid parental leave and having bonded with their children, they then wanted to work flexibly in some way, whether that was compressed hours, part-time, looking for a job share, or just having the flexibility to come in and out, maybe doing a bit of homeworking. And that is when they found a brick wall. So for me, what that illustrates is the kind of societal change that really needs to happen, and that you guys are all vanguards of, you're shining lights. But it is, for me, it's really interesting. Working Families was involved in that original shared parental leave request in 2013. Right. And our position now would be it was a fantastic start, but actually government needs to make a step change now. And the thing for us that would make this the biggest difference would be paid parental leave for men.
So that's not it's often the case that there's more paid maternity leave for women, but not paid parental leave for men. Yeah. That's a common theme, they're not equitable.
No, they're not equitable. And as a charity, when we talk to the employer members who work with us, we always ask them to do as much as they can to make it parental leave, not paternity or maternity. Excuse me. And to make it as equal as possible. And that's incredibly important because we know that so many people, these 13 million working parents with caring responsibilities, it's a juggle. Every day is a juggle. You know, you've got to get all of these things right. And so many people want a decent career, but they also want to be able to balance that with their responsibilities at home as well as at work. We also know that when we spoke to, when we asked these questions in the poll, 30% of working parents were really worried about what was going to happen to their role at the end of the pandemic, because so many of them had been working flexibly or had been able to work from home. And 50% of them said if the flexible working arrangements that they had were not going to continue, then they would, if possible, be looking for a new job. So there also is now beginning to be that pressure from employees onto employers to say, actually, you need to do something. And then the final thing that I would echo is that culture is such an important thing. If you see senior men at Aviva, I heard a talk recently, there are 2 senior men who are in a job share. And they both were interested in doing this because they had taken paid parental leave within the organization. And one of them was saying what he finds really interesting is that he does a job share. His wife works part-time. Her job doesn't go away when she's not there. He knows his job is being done by somebody equally competent. So in terms of stress levels, actually, he feels his job, although it is a more senior position than his wife's, actually has sometimes less stress than his wife's, because there's that constant knowledge that those emails are piling up. So men leaning in, having this 50-50 share is vital for our society. And finally, there's an organization called the Fatherhood Institute that has research that shows the impact of men being involved in childcare, particularly when their children is young, has lifelong consequences, not just for the children, but also for the family, and has a significant impact on children when they're very young in terms of their learning.
I just wonder if we haven't been presented with an opportunity as we emerge from COVID and we move to sort of hybrid working, whether or not that's going to be a sort of a trigger or a catalyst for normalizing these conversations. We've moved to a hybrid way of working for a significant part of our workforce. So I think I think we have an opportunity here.
Yep. Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. Particularly if organizations are actually going to trust their employees to do their work and get the job done, but to be able to do it in such a way that they can go and do parents' evening. They can go, you know, the dads can be the first point of call when there's a problem with the school, as opposed to it automatically being the mums. So all of those kinds of changes, we have an opportunity. The time is right. The time is ripe. So hopefully we will see that change.
Shoko, do you think from your personal experience, have you taken things into what the business now puts in place?
Yeah, so at Celtic, we started offering flexible working about 3-4 years ago. But during the pandemic, I saw that we really need to change. So I explored further options of how we could adapt to new way of working. And we implemented agile working or some people call result-only work environment, with the help of an organisation called parity, which means fair play in Welsh. So agile working offers much more flexibility in terms of when you work or where you work, and give much more autonomy to each individuals and give more accountabilities. So we took about 6 months to sort of work out how we can implement agile working, and we fully implemented in February this year. So it has been a lot of work, but it's given much better work environment for our staff, and staff are much, much happier. We work all different technologies like Slack or Google Meet, Zoom, and it's actually now work much more productively as well, and staff are happier.
Shoko, do you mind? Sorry, Jago, do you mind if I ask a question? I'm not quite sure what the etiquette is here.
No, there's no etiquette, Robin. Just crack on.
Shoko, when you say it took 6 months to sort of establish agile working, does that mean you were sort of working out what criteria, what sort of rules to put in?
Yeah, so within that 6 months period, we did look at every single individual's job descriptions. So instead of traditional job description, the way we write is more sort of performance based. Yeah. And also we looked at, it's called service level agreement, but basically it's promises between staff. So perhaps, let's say, if you receive email within the team, how quickly you respond, or if you receive inquiry from customer, how quickly we have to respond. So it's all promises about time frame, how we can get back to each other. And we also created team charters across all department. So that's basically best practices, how we should communicate each other internally, externally. And also perhaps, you know, when you working hours, you must update on the Google calendars. So, you know, we're not going to contact each other when you're not working. So it's a bit like etiquette. So we had a lot of discussion, workshops, that's why we took 6 months. But I think that 6 months was worth the time well spent, yeah.
Robin, so interesting there, Robin. Knowing relatively the sizes of, you know, Shoko and your organisations,
very small.
That's a big job at Oxford International. But often we see big companies, you know, making advances with other things, like Jane was saying, with, you know, big companies are offering shared or paid parental leave. What is that? Is it something to do with the size of the organisation will financially let you do it, but actually the going as deep as Shoko's just discussed is quite difficult in a big company, so it just takes longer or it won't happen? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily a big company. We might be bigger than Shoko's organisation. You know, also the way the company has grown and evolved, I think, has made some of these things quite difficult. I might be becoming a little bit defensive here, but I think when an organisation like Oxford International, when we've grown exponentially, and trying to put these sort of systems and practices in while you're growing, also while you've got certain sort of pressures, you know, from your investors,
of course,
can be difficult. But I think, I'm sorry, Jay, I'm not quite sure what more to say without revealing too many commercial sensitivities.
No, but I think.
But again, I think it's things like this and also with the leadership that we've got. Because I think most of you will probably know that, you know, we've got a female CEO that without a doubt helps, and also we've got pretty sympathetic investors. Yes. So there aren't really too many excuses. Not for ask me in a year's time where we are.
Brilliant. Yeah, that would be great. David, we
just going to jump in.
Sorry, I'm going to be on the phone to you, Robin, very soon to say, come and work with working families.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. And we'll catch up again in a year, and two of you can let us know how it went. Sorry, David, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to try and develop the point a bit, because whatever solutions that we come up with, sometimes it is very hard to make big leaps. And I think it's very good to kind of listen to ideas like Shoko's shared about how people can work differently. But for big companies, different working environments as to, you know, some environments require people to be present there. If you work in a hospital, you've got to be there, you know, or most of the time anyway, in a lot of roles. So it's also about, because people have touched on like society and how you start to change your way of thinking and how people approach a situation. So it may be that some organizations can't leap to where Shoko's is. It needs to be more of an evolution, or it just because of the way they work, they can't do it. But that doesn't mean that we can't find ways to try and change that mindset, you know, and how the theme of this discussion around parental leave is a key one, because I think as a father, as someone in my family, I've taken an experience from it, but I'm also an employee, well, a manager, an employer, if you like, of people, and it changes the mindset of how I think about, you know, flexibility of working hours. So for example, at work, we've done things like core hours, which give flexibility about people to come in a bit later in the day and maybe finish later. Not being so rigid about 9 till 5, which really gets in the way of most people, unless they've got a 5-minute commute, are doing school runs.
Yeah.
So why not be a little bit more flexible, where if you want people in the office where they can still overlap for most of the day with their colleagues, but they're able to at least do one of the school runs. If both parents are working, they can maybe top and tail the day and find a way of working between them. That just starts to make it a little bit more easier for them. When you're thinking about promotions, recruiting, all of these things, to start thinking as people and not necessarily subconsciously as female or male and what they might be doing. Again, that all comes from parental leave, because, you know, just as likely a male may take 2 or 3 months off as it is, you know, just the mother taking 6. All of these things start to normalize, take away kind of commercial pressures and start to normalize a different way of being. And I think each company then will adapt a little bit as to what it can do in that environment.
Absolutely, David. What we would always say to individuals as well as to organizations is try things. Don't make promises in terms of this is definitely the way we're going to be working for the rest of our lives. Give it a go. If somebody wants to change their shift pattern, for example, and certainly even within place-based work, we think that there is some flexibility in almost every job in order that people can manage their caring responsibilities at home, whether that's children or increasingly whether that's elder care or an older adult. And Shoko mentioned earlier on, look at the job description. If it is a place-based work, how much of the role actually needs to be in the place? So for example, I was talking today to somebody from a bank, and they were saying, apart from the people to guard the money, actually so much of everything else can be done in a way that is flexible, but that the teams themselves have worked out.
Yeah. Do you think, Jane, that organizations can do more to encourage men to do that?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that can happen. Centrica had a chief exec, and may still have a chief exec, who has a child with a significant disability. And the impact that has had on his personal life means that he is open to flexible working for everybody, men and women, and he models that. And women often in very senior positions will be modeling that in the same way that Shoko is. But there aren't that many men modeling it. And that's the really important thing. And what we tend to see is that men who are taking paid parental leave, men who are working flexibly, who are sharing care, are possibly not discussing it with other men.
Mm-hmm.
They're not kind of advertising it in the way that they could be. And, you know, I would argue that is partly a cultural thing, that fear that, am I not going to be considered for this promotion? Because we know that this motherhood penalty exists. It's not just that women don't go for the promotions, it's also that they are less likely to be promoted. Anybody who works part-time is 1/5 as likely to be promoted as their full-time colleagues.
Which is amazing, especially when you talk about job share, because the job share, I've been reading some stats. I'm a big fan of Dragon's Den. Job share seems to be getting 2 dragons, doesn't it? It's the equivalent. So I don't know why we don't all encourage that a lot more, but it is incredible that that's such a, there's a stigma attached to that,
Yeah.
isn't there? It's not
Yeah.
talked about.
We had one job share, now we've got another one, and it's absolutely fantastic. Nobody else is as interested in your role as the person that's also doing it. And from an employer's perspective, you definitely get two brains for the price of one. And as far as the team is concerned, you'll always get on slightly better with one or the other. So there's always ways to have difficult conversations. Fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll move it very slightly. I've been reading up on that thing. So there's a number of themes that keep coming up. So one is the difference between unpaid work at home and the emotional load, the emotional labor. Now, because I think one is easier to split and easier to see that you've got 50-50 and therefore you're taking some of that burden away. But the stats seem to say that women are still taking the burden of the unseen labor, the thinking about the shopping and what we need and the play date and that present needs to be done and that needs to be done before that, and I need this because we're going on holiday next week. And so is there anything we can do as us, or as like, well, what's interesting when you say modeling, but as businesses, can we work with people to try and solve that problem, do you think? I might start with you, Shoko, because you've got that experience of having both done it, and you've got quite an interesting dynamic there, that you've both swapped the same roles.
Yeah, so for my household, I think I still take more emotional labors. Simply, I think it's easier for me to manage that side of business. Perhaps I haven't given enough trust in my husband, and just remembering things, and just family birthdays to kids, friends' birthday parties, birthdays, gift, not just a shopping, but also dogs, vet appointment, dentist, swimming lessons, all sort of things. And I have seen my staff almost having breakdown, just trying to remember everything, juggling with family things. And sometimes I just take him out from the school and just go to the pub. We have a lovely pub in front of our school, just to have a chat, or just a coffee shop. And I think it's important for the company to offer the support, not necessarily interfere what's happening inside of their personal life, but perhaps if they want to discuss, or if they want to be listened to, then offer that support, which is important.
Absolutely. Robin, is there anything from your side, how do you feel about that can organisations impact on that?
I'm suddenly feeling very guilty, because my wife does all the online shopping. She remembers all the birthdays, and I want equality as much as the next man, but remembering birthdays might be a step too far. No, look, I think again we come back to trying to do things to promote the conversation around this topic.
Yeah.
We have an employee assistance program, so it's again promoting that. And also I think coming back to what Jane said about sort of perhaps men not talking about this with other men or with colleagues, it's about sort of fostering networks within organizations.
Yes.
So you've got people with similar issues, and giving them a sort of a platform to talk about these things together, much like with other groups, where I think forming networks of sort of communities, I think can be very supportive.
Yeah. Well, I found a few actually having just getting starting this series off, and I've been plugged into a few people. I'm finding lots of these networks coming up with people saying the same things, and the themes are the same, really, that men feel this way but aren't talking about it. So when they find a group that they feel comfortable talking about it in, then they like it. What they're also saying is online it's hard because the conversation is very different, and one person puts a particular view in, and it's hard for everyone to get off it. So I think doing something like that and encouraging men to talk about it and understanding all the issues and understanding what's involved, to me sounds great, because I believe men do want to talk about this. And I think it needs a certain amount of courage, it needs a lot of courage from organizations and people like me, because just because they feel difficult things to talk about. So having that sort of taking that leap of faith can be very difficult, and maybe it's organizations like Working Families can support with those like first steps. Sounds like it, Jane, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. We would always encourage organizations to have networks for parents, and it may very well be that actually in some organizations they need a network for dads, specifically, because there may be all kinds of issues that dads are coming across in terms of their career and their work that the mums aren't coming across, because that organization is different. We would say that in terms of bearing the emotional load, that we wouldn't expect as an employer that you would get involved in that bit of your employees' lives. But I think I would certainly say, and apologies, Shoko, but I would certainly say that most of my girlfriends who I adore are rubbish at giving up control around certain things within the house. And that kind of emotional load, and saying, okay, well, this year, darling, why don't you do the Christmas cards? And if there aren't any Christmas cards, then say, it was my lovely husband's job this year, I'm sorry. Doesn't mean we don't love you, he just didn't get around to it. It's the art of delegating.
He might do it wrong for the first year, realize, and then do it right. So you can't. You've got to allow that. Everyone's got to grow into different roles. So you learn by making mistakes, don't you? So you're not going to get it right first time.
Yeah. My husband and I, I'm the social one, but whenever we go to parties, he's the one who comes home and actually tells me what people are doing in their lives.
Okay.
I don't have those small, intimate conversations that he does, because he's much less of a woohoo kind of person.
And am I right in thinking, Jane, you might have some stats here, so I've been reading that it's a myth that the whole women are better at multitasking and so are naturally better is not true. So this is not about that, is it? This is about culture and intention and all those things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I think many women would say that they're better at keeping a number of things in their heads in terms of remembering things that are happening. But I think, slow thinking, fast thinking, all the research is that if we're going to do something well, we need to concentrate on it.
Absolutely.
Do we know? Sorry, Jago.
Sorry.
I was going to say, do we know if other countries are better at this than in the UK?
Better in terms of gender parity around childcare?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Most of the European countries are streets ahead. The International Group for Women's Leadership, the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, have literally published today something about gender pay gap. And they've looked at Sweden, South Africa, Spain, Germany, France, and the UK. And we are not doing well. I mean, look, we're doing better than South Africa. I'm a South African, but we are way behind France, Germany, and Sweden.
David, I was going to come to you. Back to personal slightly. So you and your wife both work full time.
Yeah.
What do you think that? Sorry, I'm putting words into your mouth. Do you think you're taking the shared parental leave, because you talked about what you then learned and having the full responsibility to change it? Has that changed the balance then of emotional labour and in your home life?
I think because it's recorded, so I have to be honest. In case you watches it. So I think, I mean, because I tried to look at this, I mean, Jago and I know each other way back. I've never been the best organised person. So probably on some of the things that you mentioned around worrying about certain things from school or such like is my wife would definitely do a bit more. But then I also do a lot more in other areas. So I think we find a balance, but I think I like to think it's a little bit in line with the individuals and our strengths and weaknesses of people.
Yeah.
I do think
do a lot more of the unpaid work, but maybe not the emotional labour.
Yeah,
because you do a lot of the pickups and drop-offs and all those.
I do a lot of that. I do a lot of the stuff in the house as well. And just by the nature of our commutes, my wife's commutes more than mine. So again, that gives me a lot more time back here. Ordinarily outside of COVID, obviously COVID is a completely different experience as well for all of us. And we've touched on that earlier, and that's changing everyone's thought processes in lots of ways. I think the one other thing around that as an observation, as a father, sometimes is a bit tricky getting into, or feels a bit intimidating getting into kind of the emotional side, is that quite often a higher percentage of the people organising parties, social events are the mothers. And it's a little bit harder to, unless you're a particularly social guy. So a bit like Shoko's husband, I'm not necessarily the first person at a party going around to talk to everyone. And the idea of starting to talk to other moms outside the school gates doesn't come readily, if you like. And so that then is a little bit of a barrier then to, you're not in the network, you're not in the discussion, and it's all too easy just to focus on other areas, if you like.
Yeah.
And my wife naturally is included in the WhatsApp group, because that's what people think. Yeah. And so she's automatic. So there's almost society's pushing us that way, as well as probably it's the right thing for our own personal strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, fair enough. So it's interesting. So when I went to the full-time role, the stay-at-home role 2 years ago, I was struggling a bit with getting into the WhatsApp groups and getting into the, that society and being the one. And I had a few people I'd try and arrange a play date, and they'd be like, I'll tell Sarah. I was like, no, it's fine, you can tell me. So there's a bit of that. But then I realized, like, when I'd been doing it for a while and I just, got in, I then didn't text any of the dads. I was just going to the mums because I got in. So that's not good either. So I've been thinking about that and thinking, well, I've got to do play dates with the dads so that we, so that we're also doing that. And I then, so we're on our WhatsApp group, the reps for our parent council were retiring after 2 years. This is for, so I'm actually I'm the treasurer, so I was on already. And then everyone was saying, who's going to volunteer? And there was no one. And I was on the call and I said, there's not many dads on this call. It's all women. Any dads want to do it? And so we've had a little bit of conversation about that. So I'm starting to correct that thing that I realized I could do more on, basically. We've only got a few minutes left. I've got one more question. So the other theme that comes up is that financially, once that start of the maternal penalty, the motherhood penalty starts, often so back to the no gender pay gap for full-time workers under 40 in the UK. Once it starts, the men are earning more. Therefore, women tend to, there's a financial conversation there. Why is it though that why do you think it is that we see lots of women who earn more than their male partners still working part-time when the husbands are working full-time? Is that entirely cultural? Jane, I might start with you there.
We've been thinking about this a lot. One of the things that we would like people to start thinking about is when they look at the cost of childcare, don't look at the cost of childcare as just coming out of the mother's salary. Look at the cost of childcare, especially in those early years, as coming out of the joint household income. And that probably will be a bit of a step change. And then the other thing that I think happens is, with reference to that emotional load, and perhaps also in terms of, being a parent is an absolutely extraordinary, wonderful thing. Children can often be great fun to be around, and sometimes working full time is pretty rubbish. So I think there are an enormous number of factors that play into that. And a lot of it, in my view, is very likely to be gender driven, but I don't have that evidence.
No, fair enough. Shoko, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, when 2 older kids were in the nursery, basically my wage hit my account, and then almost, 80% of salary goes out from account. And the thought of it was, like Jane just said, was really depressing. But the way I thought about it is actually the nursery is investment for children's development. From the early age, if they play with other children of their age, then surely they would develop their social skills as well. I just some parents spend loads of money on their children's educations. Both of our kids are in a state school, so obviously we don't pay private fee or anything like that, but I just thought it's actually a good thing for children, and also investment in our career, plus less burden on my husband and my time as well. Being parents 24/7 can be quite challenging. I certainly didn't like the thought of being staying-at-home mum myself, so just change the way, like Jane said, I can't agree more that just to change how the childcare cost could be.
Yeah, and this hasn't been helped by the change in the legislation, which has sort of closed childcare voucher schemes to new entrants. So I think we're going to need. I mean, it might need some change in legislation to really enact change.
Yeah, cost of childcare in the UK is really expensive compared to many countries.
Yep.
I think so. We're at 5 o'clock. Apparently, there's something happening really soon that some people might be interested in. So I might wrap us up there. So thanks to everyone. I think that was great. I could carry on asking questions, so we might have to get you all back. And for everyone else listening, thanks for joining us. I just want to say that this series really is to, I don't know all the topics we should discuss, so please come to us with things you think that are important for the discussion around men making a change and getting involved in all of this. And let's lead 50/50, guys. Have you got anything to wrap up with? I'm just want to say thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. It's really fascinating, and we have recorded it and we'll be sending it round to everyone if you'd like to have a second viewing. So thank you so much, and enjoy the football, and come on England.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone. Lovely to see you all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye
Thanks.
now.
Bye.
Thanks everybody. Bye.